Well, the first few months of the year have many opportunities for holidays, and many of those holidays involve food. I'm sure you're all familiar with the food pyramid. It's no wonder that the very top is something that is near and dear to our hearts, our tongues, and our stomachs, and that is chocolate. Here's a little story, a personal story about that. Well, there was one day that I got up, and like many of you do, you seem to be models of efficiency, so I'm sure you've got your to-do lists. I was not working that day, but I had a huge list of chores and errands to do. I needed to drop off some shoes at the shoe repair. I needed to pick up some clothes at the cleaners. I needed to drop off some books at the library. I needed to go to the store. I needed to take back a shirt that I'd bought for my husband that didn't fit. There were just a lot of little errands to do. And I was determined to do them all, cross them off. Tell me the truth. Have you ever put things on your to-do list just for the joy of crossing them off? Have you ever put things that you've already done on your to-do list just so you could cross them off immediately after you wrote them? I've done that before. It gives you that sense of accomplishment and empowerment. Well, so I was checking things off one after another, one after another. Now, the shoe repair place is just right next door to one of my favorite places, and that was Trader Joe's. And I thought that since I was going to be so efficient that day doing all my errands, that I would just take a tiny detour into Trader Joe's, get a few things I needed, and buy a little package of one of my favorite things, and that was their mint chocolate pieces. So I got back in my car and I opened up that package and I ate a couple of those chocolate pieces, and then I was back on task on my to-do list. I drove to the mall and I was going to return the shirt at Macy's. And you can get sidetracked at the mall, right? There's just an awful lot to do. But I was absolutely determined not to get sidetracked. I had come to return a shirt. That is what I was going to do. So I parked in the parking structure right next to Macy's, and I got out and I walked into Macy's and I returned the shirt, and impossible to believe, I know, I turned right around and walked back out, back to my car. Hadn't been gone long, 10 minutes, maybe 15 at the very most. But when I got to my car, I realized that my car had been broken into. Well, probably not broken into. I was in such a hurry, I probably hadn't actually locked the door. But in any case, someone had been in my car. Now, my friends and my children, they mock me consistently because they say that my car is really sort of an office on wheels, especially when I had things to do. I've got the things that I'm picking up and dropping off, like the shoes and the library books and the cleaning and things, and a bunch of other stuff just in case I happen to be where those things need to go. So there's usually a lot of stuff in my car, and I'm usually the only person who's in my car, so I've got plenty of room to work with, even in a small car. But I could tell that somebody had been in there. The glove compartment was open and everything was out and strewn around on the seats. Things that were in bags had been dumped out on the floor. It was a mess, even more of a mess than usual. And I thought, this is horrible. If you've ever had any kind of a robbery in your home or your car, you realize that you feel so vulnerable and such a sense of outrage. And I was feeling all of that as I started gathering things up, all the things, the maps and things that go in the glove compartment, putting the things back in the bags that they went in. And I thought, well, what have they taken? There were a lot of possibilities, truly. But who breaks into cars to steal library books? Not so many people, I wouldn't think. They are free if you go to the library. Of course, you do have to return them, but still. So I couldn't figure out that the thief had taken anything. Of course, it had only been a few minutes. But then it hit me. What was missing? And I imagine that some of you have guessed. My bag of chocolate. Opened. It was the only thing that was gone. And it was definitely gone. I looked around and I thought, who breaks into cars to steal chocolate? Now, I like chocolate quite a bit. It's pretty high on my list of things that I would like to have with me at all times, if possible. But I do not break into cars to get my chocolate. No, I pay for my chocolate. So I couldn't imagine who would do that. And so with that feeling of being violated, I continued on, rather disheartened, with my list of things to do. Well, about 2 weeks later, I was sound asleep. It was 6 in the morning, time for me to get up, really, but I was still asleep when the phone rang. In a groggy voice, I answered the phone. Hello? And a deep male voice said, is this Marilyn McPhee? I said, yes. He said, well, we've got your chocolate. And I thought, what? You've got my chocolate? I couldn't imagine. Was he holding it for ransom? I mean, the package only cost $1.59, was easily replaced. I like chocolate as much as the next person, but I was unlikely to pay top dollar to regain my package of chocolate, especially since it had been opened. I said, you've got my chocolate. He said, yes, we've got your chocolate. I repeated, you've got my chocolate. This was a senseless conversation. I said, who is this? He said, well, this is Ranger Miller down at the Los Penasquitos Canyon Preserve, not far from my house. I said, you've got my chocolate. I realized I was sounding repetitive and kind of foolish at this point. He said, yes, we've got your chocolate and your family. Photos. I said, you've got my chocolate and my family photos. He said, yes. I said, well, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'll be right there. So I got out of bed and I put on some clothes. I headed for the door and my husband said, where are you going? And who was that on the phone? And I said, I'm just going down to the preserve. I won't be gone long. I'll be right back. And I left. Well, I drove down the hill from my house to the nature preserve and I drove into the parking lot. The parking lot was completely deserted. Of course it was completely deserted. It was 6 in the morning. Well, there was one pickup truck in the parking lot. Now, you would think that I would have found this alarming. I was still mostly asleep. I didn't. It didn't seem to make an impression on me at all. So I got out of my car and I went into the office. Well, at first I thought, the door's going to be locked. Nobody's in there. It's 6 in the morning. But I pushed the door and sure enough, it was open. I went into the building, and there was a counter with a desk behind it. There was nobody sitting at the desk, and you would think that maybe I would have left well enough alone at this point. But no, I called out, hello, is anybody there? And a man came walking in from a back room. He was wearing a ranger uniform. I found that a bit reassuring. He said, can I help you? As though I was just somebody who'd wandered in off the street at 6 in the morning. I said, I'm Marilyn McPhee. I think maybe you called me, something about chocolate? He said, oh, yes, yes. And he reached into the drawer of the desk and he pulled out a large manila envelope and handed it to me. And he said, with the manner of a policeman interrogating a suspect, he said, is this yours? I looked at it. Sure enough, there was my name and address on the envelope. I said, well, I guess so, because look, see, it says Marilyn McPhee, and that's my address. He said, I thought so. He said, are you missing this? I said, not that I'm aware of. He said, well, take a look. And he opened up the envelope and dumped out some photos. I said, yeah, those are some pictures from my family reunion last summer. And I remembered that my cousin said she was going to send me some, but I hadn't gotten them, that I hadn't missed them. I figured they'd come sooner or later. He said, are you sure they're yours? I said, yes, I'm sure they're mine. This is my grandmother's house. See, look, there's me over there sitting on the steps. He said, all right then. Well, I'm glad we could get those back to you. And I said, and chocolate? He said, oh, yes, chocolate. He said, follow me. And I followed him out to the parking lot, to the pickup truck that was there. And there in the bed of the pickup truck were 10 or 12 brown paper wrapped packages with a return address from a chocolate company in the Midwest. And they were addressed to a person named Shirley, who lived in Scripps Ranch. He said, are these yours? Well, I admit I did think about it for a second or two. But then I said, no, see, that says Shirley. That's not me. But I think you should probably get these to Shirley. It looks like she's planning some kind of a big baking project. I said, where did you get these anyway? And he said, well, somebody held up a FedEx truck. And I guess they took what they wanted and what they didn't want, they left on a bench in the preserve. He said, I guess they didn't want your family pictures. I said, yeah, and it looks like they didn't want chocolate either. I know for a fact that some people break into cars just to steal the chocolate. He looked at me like I was crazy, and he said, well, have a good day. And I went home. My husband was just leaving, and he said, what was that about? And I said, oh, it's a long story. I'll have to tell you later. I got a lot of things to do today, though. I picked up my list. It had a lot of errands on it. I needed to return some books to the library and pick up my shoes at the shoe repair. And while I was at the shoe repair, I thought maybe I'd just stop at Trader Joe's and get another package of chocolate. I figured I deserved it. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.